Good morning. My name is Barbara Fuller. I'm Chair of the Board of Washtenaw County Road Commissioners, and I welcome you to this virtual working session, January 19th, 2021. We need to call the roll here for the record. Carrie, can you help me with that, please?
Barb, I'd be happy to jump in.
Go ahead.
Let's see, do we have Commissioner Doug Fuller?
Doug Fuller is here and participating from Salem Township.
All right, Commissioner Roderick Green, I believe already called in his absence.
Yes.
Commissioner Gloria Yamas,
Gloria Yamas participating virtually in Pittsfield Township in Washtenaw County.
Commissioner Joanne McCullum,
Commissioner Joanne McCullum is present and attending virtually from Ypsilanti Township.
and Commissioner Barbara Fuller.
Commissioner Barb Fuller participating remotely from Sharon Township, Washtenaw County, Michigan. And then would you like to identify your staff that are present?
Sure, I'd be happy to do
Ms.
that.
Managing Director,
Yep.
for the record.
Cheryl Siddle, Managing Director. And we have, let's see, Dan Ackerman,
Yep, here.
Jim Harmon,
Present.
and Matt McDonnell.
Good morning.
I'd also like to welcome Commissioner Sue Schenk from our Washtenaw County Board of Commissioners, who is participating as well. May I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second,
Very good. We need to do roll call votes because this is a virtual meeting. So I will start with Commissioner McCullum,
yes.
Commissioner Yamas,
Yes.
Commissioner Green is absent, Commissioner Doug Fuller,
Present and yes.
and Commissioner Barb Fuller votes yes on the agenda as well. At this time, I would like our communications manager, Emily Kaiser, to describe how people may participate in the public participation portion of the meeting.
Thanks, Commissioner Fuller. I'm going to go over a few housekeeping details and then I'll get into how we do public comment. So I will explain how you can do public comment. You can join either, or you can participate either from your computer or touch tone phone. The chat feature on this Zoom meeting is enabled, but it's really only for if you need technical support as members of the public. I will try to monitor that and help you out. Commissioners, if you're having technical issues, we ask that you contact our help desk and they'll be able to help you throughout the meeting. The audio and video of this meeting is being recorded. A link to the video recording will be posted to wcroads.org in the next day or two, and it's also will be posted on our YouTube channel. And today's meeting agenda is posted to wcroads.org as well, and I will put a link to the agenda that the board just approved in the chat just momentarily. So for public comment, if you are viewing the meeting from your computer, you want to first make sure that you click Join Audio, and then you can raise your hand by clicking the Participants button at the bottom of your screen, and then the Raise Hand button at the bottom right of your screen. If you dialed into the meeting from your touch tone phone, you can raise your hand by dialing *9. I'll unmute participants with raised hands one at a time, and each person will have approximately 3 minutes to share their comments with the board. Is there anybody who would like to make comment at this point? Commissioner Fuller, I do not see anybody with a raised hand at this time.
Thank you, Emily. We will move into the first item on the agenda, which is the draft, excuse me, the draft tree policy. There were copious comments submitted. I want to thank Cheryl for touching base with Commissioner Schenk to make sure we received her comments. And I appreciate Sue for putting those together and submitting them. Thank you very much. Let's go right to it. Commissioners, what are your thoughts regarding the comments that we received? I also want to hear from staff along the way.
Barb, if it would be helpful, we put a very brief PowerPoint together to just sort of guide the conversation, give a quick summary. If anybody wants to look at the recording later, it'll at least allow them to see sort of the summary that we shared with respect to the board.
Thank you, Cheryl. Please proceed.
Sure. Thank you, Emily. So obviously this is a subject that we have talked about quite a bit. So Emily, if we could go to the next slide, please. We started back in August and in September talking about just sort of the general overview of the environmental stewardship programs that the Road Commission does have, that there is a lot that we do with respect to the environment, trees being only one component of it. So we spent some time, again, back in August and September going through the entire array of those topics. So then in October, staff brought forth to the board a draft tree policy. I think we had a very nice conversation, very thorough conversation on the draft that was proposed at that time. Comments were suggested and made to the policy itself at that point in time prior to going out for public comment. Next slide, please, Emily. Starting in early November, we did go out for public comment. We were out for public comment. We solicited comments for approximately 6 weeks, all the way through December 18th, right before the holidays. And we did that in a variety of formats. We did share the policy itself. We sent that out to county commissioners, department heads, township officials, actually both previous boards and newly elected boards, because we did send that out twice, both before and after at least the township officials took office in November 20th. We had the information up on our website the entire time. We did post, I think, 4 different times on Facebook with respect to the public comment that we were soliciting comment, as well as a couple of times through Twitter. The Sun-Times did run an article on November 18th with respect to the draft policy and the fact that we were soliciting comment. We also did hold a virtual public meeting on December 3rd. Next slide, please. So as a result, as of December 18th, we did receive 54 comments in a variety of formats. And as you can see here, majority of those comments did come in through the online form. We had some that were submitted through email. There were some that were raised through the public meeting. And then we did have one township, that was Salem Township, that passed a resolution asking for some changes to the draft policy. All of those were printed out and sent out to the 5 road commissioners for your review last week. We know that that was sort of a lengthy amount of information, but we did give you not only the summary, but we also gave you copies of the individual comments that received so that you could see the nature of the comments. Next slide, please. And so essentially, this was staff's perspective, that we were really looking at the themes that we saw coming through on the comments. These are the 5 that we saw. Certainly, as Barb was indicating, happy to open it up for additional thoughts with respect to again, I'm using the term themes because that would be the easiest thing for staff as we are continuing to, whether it be refine the policy itself or certain carry out the policy, to sort of understand some of the generalities as opposed to, and there certainly were some very specific comments that could be addressed as well. I would like to at least reference the first one with respect to the lack of public education. I don't want to get into necessarily all of the details, but one of the things that did come through, at least to staff as we are reading the comments, is that we still have the need for ongoing education with respect to trees itself. I think that that is going to be an ongoing effort that will be necessary on behalf of our organization. We still have at least a certain number of requests for things like, we'll just lower the speed limit, just put up guardrail, just have increased police enforcement, and some just general lack of understanding of why we need to do the things that we need to do. So while I put that as number 1, I don't know that that needs to be included in the policy itself, but it is something that came through, at least that's as from staff's perspective, as an ongoing effort that we need to do as an organization. So hopefully that's helpful, at least with respect to a summary. And like I said, these are sort of the themes that staff saw, and I don't know, Commissioner Fuller, if you'd like to continue with details, or if you want to look at the themes themselves.
I believe the themes are very helpful. When I reviewed the 60 pages of comments over the weekend, I certainly attempted to do the very same thing that our managing director had done, was try to group them in a way that was manageable and reflective of what the public was trying to tell us or ask us. So let's follow Cheryl's themes here and start with public education. Do commissioners have thoughts, comments, anything you want to point out regarding the theme of public education by the Road Commission? Certainly,
Chair
Commissioner
Fuller.
McCollum.
Yes, I agree with the themes, and the first one, lack of public education. I thought the tree policy explained some things, but obviously it can't go into every detail of why things were chosen on the policy. And so I think that if the public is educated about why we chose the things we did on the policy, then I think that would help understand why the policy is written up the way it is.
Thank you. Commissioner Yamas?
So, like Barb, I also attempted to group things. I like the way that you did group them, because that's exactly what I did in the concerns that people had. I ran into quite a few other issues that I thought might be addressed that had to do with questioning how we, people are unfamiliar with our tree trimming policy. And some people suggested that we trim trees with the boom mower, and I would think that we do not. That was a question I put forth in an email. But
So are you talking about maintenance practices? Right now, I'd like to focus on public education.
okay, well then public education obviously did appear to be, and I guess lack of public ed, definitely people needed to be educated on the processes. That does not seem to be clear in the policy. Included in that public education would also have to do with people seem to be unhappy with how we do that. And that may be lumped in with public outreach, because they felt part of the public education would help people understand not only the policies, but how they can get help. And maybe we can, in that public education, address how we might be more transparent on what our policies are, so they're easier to find on the website. You know, our outreach program, because it makes reference to using some of our policies, and people were took that part of your comments as I don't want to say trite, but dismissive, as if we were attempting to just say this is what we're going to do, and this doesn't have, we really are not concerned by you. So I think the public education portion is important, and that can be in many ways, you know, how we make information available on the website easier to access.
Okay. Commissioner Doug Fuller, did you have anything you wanted to remark on the, and I'd like to say perceived lack of public education myself, because I
Yeah.
think we do one heck of a job of bending over backwards to push information out, both social media, posting on the website, alerts about road work, advisories, sign up if you're interested in what's going on with a project. I don't know, I don't think the county even takes measures like we do to push information out to the public. So when I hear lack of public education, as I have said historically, not just today, but in the past, I need to hear where we need to be sharing information that we are not. And I get a little bit bristly here, folks. I'll be candid with you. That short of calling every resident in Washtenaw County about what we're doing and then inviting them to micromanage how we do it, I don't know how we can do better and continue to get the work done that we need to get done and are charged with doing. So if there's a lack of public education from people, I need them to step up and tell us how we fix it. That's what I do with my kids, did with my kids. You don't like what's going on? You tell me what it is that we need to do differently and we can explore that. But I can't just be shooting fish in a barrel when people raise their hands and complain. So anybody else have a comment about public education?
Yes, I do.
Please.
The one complaint that I have heard consistently over the past 12 years is specific to tree trimming.
Is this public education, Commissioner, or maintenance practices, do you think?
I think it's public education.
Fine, please proceed.
The complaint that I have consistently heard is you guys show up in front of my house, is the complaint that I hear most often, with no warning and start trimming trees. That has to do certainly with our maintenance practices, because that's what tree trimming is. But the public education part of that is, and I don't know that this is a failure on our part, but it's outreach that we could potentially figure out a way to do, is that when we know that a tree crew is going to be working in blank area, don't care, choose a township, and let people know a day ahead when we can, because we can't always, and I certainly admit that, but when we can, then yes. And I don't mean we need to call every one of 320,000, whatever it is, population of the county, but if we're going to be trimming trees on, choose a road, Walsh Road in beautiful Dexter Township on a given Wednesday, if we know we're going to be doing that, let's at least make sure that the township supervisor knows that. And if we know that we're going to be trimming trees on 4 different, because we work from a list, we know where we're going to go most of the time. And yes, call those people. That's a suggestion. And I'd only make it a suggestion in the form of, let's evaluate, let staff specifically evaluate how that could be done. That's the only comment I have. Thank you.
You're welcome. I would add to Doug's remark that there needs to be, and it was, I'll take the phrase from one of the comments, there needs to be a cost benefit analysis done here as well. We have limited resources at the Road Commission. We have no ability to levy millages, fees, anything else. We have to get the work done with the money that we are given, so to speak. So to the extent that we have staff beefing up any of these items, we need to remember that our managing director and our senior staff are constantly juggling how to get the work done that we are charged to do, in addition to these other outreach and public education practices. So I'm not against them. I'm just saying we've got to be pragmatic and realistic about how far we can stretch people and what we can expect of them. work very hard to establish a degree of trust and openness with the public, which I think we've done a great job. Our foremen, our communication with our supervisors all the time. See-Click Fix puts the public directly in contact with our foremen on the ground in those specific districts. So again, we need to be keeping in mind what our responsibilities are and what the priorities within those responsibilities might be. Are we ready to move on to maintenance practices?
Yeah.
I have one more comment, Chair.
Please, Joanne.
Lack of public education. I think concur with you that the Road Commission puts out information and educates the public very well. With the tree policy, I think it should say lack of public education for the tree policy. We spent a good amount of time going over that. And so I learned some things that I didn't know myself about the tree, how the Road Commission has, legal responsibilities and things like that. I didn't know that. So I'm thinking, giving it to the public that they didn't spend an hour discussing this and knowing how we got to this tree policy, and maybe in the future, when something that we don't talk about a lot or that's not out there a lot, that maybe put some additional background information of how we got there. Because this isn't something that, as far as I could tell, was really out there that much as far as how we do, trim trees or remove trees, all that background information. So just to, say I understand why the public didn't know a lot about it. Thank you.
Through the chair, this is Commissioner Yamas.
Commissioner Yamas.
I don't think that, and I concur also with the perception of lack of education, because we put a lot of it out there. But people tend to not pay attention until it's an issue that they want that is affected. I mean, in our efforts, I didn't know in that vein if we would respond to everyone that responded, or do they receive a comment back about the education process, which seems a bit laborious. But they certainly are passionate, all those that did comment, and hence my long email, Cheryl and Barb.
Which you copied to the entire board.
I did.
Let's just be clear.
I did, absolutely. I did.
Yeah, if I may, I
Please.
appreciate the comments with respect to the education. I do think that, as Commissioner McCollum said, this is a pretty broad topic. And so I think that there are things that staff could do to continue to educate just on the topic itself. Why are we doing this? What can we do? What can't we do? That type of thing, I think staff can commit to in a broader sense. And then, yes, that will be an effort, but I think that that's something then we can rely upon when questions come up. We can direct the public or whomever to that. And it's something that we have already in our arsenal of information to be able to share. So I think that something like that is a good effort that staff can undertake with a bit of time and get us to a good place. I appreciate what both Commissioner Fullers just said. I think something like tree trimming is a good example. We do it, again, for good reasons. And I think that there's an educational component to that again, can be in that broader information. And we would have to balance the ability to notify against staff resource. And sometimes we know we're going to be in the area. So sometimes there may be the ability to give a more general, and it would be more on a township type level, certainly not on a road by road basis typically, because that's filler work for most of the time for our crews. Unless we're working on a specific project and we know we're going to be on a specific road segment for a very specific reason, general tree trimming and those types of things often are filler work for our crews when we're not doing other work. And so the notification does become a bit of a problem for us to be able to do it and to manage that on a reasonable level. So on something like the public education, or again, as we're continuing to go through, I really appreciate the ability to balance staff resources, whether they be out-of-pocket expenses or whether they be staff itself and our time, against the ability, on this particular topic, to increase the things that we are already doing. That is an incredibly important thing for staff to have to be able to do so that we can be successful as an organization in carrying this out.
Thank you, Cheryl. Let's move on to maintenance practices. Do you wish to comment generally, Cheryl, about what we learned and heard?
Obviously, the policy as drafted right now talks about some of the environmental considerations, things like oak wilt, that we don't do tree removals during certain times of the year. We still are subject to environmental restrictions such as tree felling with Indiana bat and the northern long-eared bat. And other environmental considerations that are taken that we think about, and we have to abide by as we're doing our work as well. So that does sometimes, not only are we committed to following those as we have to, we do take them seriously, but it also restricts the time of year when we can do certain things that may or may not work well with the other activities that we are required to do. The policy itself does not specifically reference our maintenance practices. Again, staff is doing training. We are committed to doing ongoing training with respect to things like oak wilt. We routinely train on how to do, whether it's tree trimming, tree removal from a safety perspective with our staff. So there's a lot of things that we are doing with respect to maintenance practices that are not referenced in the policy itself. And I guess at some level, the policy being a broader, document with the intent that some of this is carried out at the staff level, whether it's through procedure or just through internal processes that are in place.
Through the chair, Commissioner
Commissioner
Yamas.
Yamas?
And I understand that the policies should be broader. However, that did bring a lot of angst that people are unaware. And if it was stated in the policy, and I don't know that you want to put every single policy, but people can refer to those, because a lot of those concerns that came through that were the citizens' lack of knowledge of what all of our policies are, because that's difficult to know. That if it was put in the policy, made reference to, there was a lot of assumptions made, I think, in the policy that people would know, because we do have a tree trimming policy that people are unaware of, and it was apparent that people asked about, do we trim trees with a boom mower? And that question is, I did want to ask you, Cheryl, is that something that we do?
We can trim anything up to 2 inches in diameter. There are times that we do swing the arm up to catch low hanging branches. So if that is the definition of tree trimming with the boom mower, then yes, we do that practice at times.
Okay. Which is harmful to trees. So I understand people's concerns about that. Because
if I may, harmful to trees suggests a lack of appreciation for the condition of the trees. As you know, our charge is to make sure that the traveled way is safe and there is visibility. And over time, as Jim Harmon has pointed out in the past, because due to financial circumstances, we haven't trimmed when things were little as much as we would have liked to, and now they're bigger. But they intrude on the roadway, They interfere with drainage in the ditches and the sides of the road. So again, keeping in mind why we do it, unless we're going to have an army of people out there with Swedish saws cutting down things one by one by one, we have to find a cost-efficient way to do this.
Okay, Barb, through the commission, that is not my suggestion. But when you swing in the boom above the head to catch what's hanging down, I'm talking about what's hanging from, because that boom mower does not cut, it rips.
What do you suggest, Commissioner?
I think that, I guess we have to look at options. I suggest that the tree trimming that happens, do we not ever, and I know that you said that, it's like tree trimming is busy work?
No, I did not say it was busy work.
I didn't say you said it was busy work, Barb. Cheryl made reference to its fill-in work, which means that it is work that is done and low hanging. So I am talking about, my suggestion would be, is there not, I mean, I guess I'm coming from an industry that's outside, and that's not our primary focus. However, did the staff in the industry that I was in absolutely had tree trimmers for those that were hanging too high. And I get, we had loppers, there were.
If I may clarify, we do tree trimming in a variety of manners. I said that if swinging the arm up to catch slow hanging branches is considered tree trimming, then yes, there are times we do that. We use a whole variety of tools up to and including chainsaws, loping shears, the whole 9 yards, in order to do tree trimming. It also is an important function. It's just often used as filler work when we're doing other activities. So it's not that it's unimportant, it is that it is, from a scheduling perspective, during this time of the year, this may be a time when we can do it because of environmental issues and restrictions from other times of year. So this would be a safe time to do it. And it also, obviously, on a day when we don't have winter maintenance, it's work that our crews, we are using to keep busy. So it's not that it's not important or it's busy work per se. It's just from a scheduling standpoint, we would do it more on filler type basis than we would necessarily schedule the work proactively like we might some other projects. So I don't want to leave the impression that it's unimportant or busy work. To me implies not important. But we also use a whole variety of means and methods for tree trimming, and this is not the only one that we use for that either. It can be used for that, but that is certainly not the only way that we trim trees. I just like to be very careful on that subject as well.
Okay, well, and I understand that, and that makes sense to me. I think that the largest objection is that when the boom lifted to go, it's my recommendation that that not be used. So Commissioner Fuller, to that end, I know that our job is not to take care of trees, but to respond to the public. And it going overhead, the boom is not meant for that. And it does rip hedges. And that was a constant theme through everything that I read. So in consideration of, and I know that it's not the only way that we trim trees, is real apparent by the education that I've been doing coming through here. What I'm saying is that if it is raised above, that we stop that practice, reaching just above. It is damaging to the tree, and that is a concern. I'm not saying that we take all of that, but this is a tree maintenance policy that we're talking about.
Further comments?
Chair,
Yes.
I think this is
Commissioner
the
McCollum.
same. Thank you. I think this is the same to me as the first bullet, educational information, because some of the maintenance, hearing the comments about using the boom and things like that, even in my own area that I live in, there was a a row of, I guess, tall branches, tall bushes, maybe a mile or two, that were cut down in this sort of way, and it looked awful. It really did. But I mean, to have someone cut that, like I would do in my own yard, that would not be feasible and financially or time. But it did not harm the bushes, and now after a while, it looks natural. So I think education on what people are doing, and that this isn't harming them, and that it looks this way the first time it's cut. It may look aesthetically unpleasing, but in the long run, this is a good practice of what we're doing. We're providing sight, which it did, which everyone appreciates now. So I think that's, to me, the same, putting it together with education, with maintenance practices. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Fuller? When the road commissioners are done speaking, it appears that Commissioner Schenk also has a question or would like to speak.
Because this is a working session and not a regular meeting, I will be flexible with respect to comments from non-road commissioners or staff. Commissioner Schenk.
Thank you, Chair Fuller. And I have to say, as I'm beginning this, that I came to last meeting a little bit late, and so I didn't realize that you were chair. Congratulations. First, I want to start by saying thank you to the Road Commission for developing the policy and for having an incredibly robust public involvement process. I put my comments in email. I sent people another email last night with some photographs that addresses this section. In response to Commissioner Yamas, yeah, I see a lot of trees that are trimmed with the boom mower, and it shreds the branches, and it does open up the trees to disease. My road was boom mowed a couple of weeks ago, and I took those pictures that I sent last night are from then. I've seen around in my district a lot of roads where, and sometimes I've contacted Director Siddall about this, where trees really are trimmed with the boom mower, and then the branches are shredded and opened up. And so these are bigger trees that may or may not come to the level of legacy trees, but they're big trees, and that opens up the branches to disease. And then, as I said in the email last night, which obviously you might not have had time to read, that disease can come in and kill those trees within a few years. And there are a few trees on my street where I'm pretty sure that that's happened, from a nick to the base or some shredding up above. And I don't think that the Road Commission has a policy of doing this, but the fact of the matter is that it happens. And so then those trees die over a few years. They then become more hazardous than they had been before they were opened up to the disease. I understand that the Road Commission has a tremendous budgetary pressure. My father worked for the Wayne County Road Commission back in the 60s and as a tree trimmer. And so they would have a couple of guys and they would go up with pulley, they had a lot of equipment. They didn't have the cherry pickers that used now, but I'm sure that the method that they use, where they were really trimming each and every tree like an arborist would, is not something that the Road Commission can afford. And still, at the same time, I would just ask, so I guess I want you to understand that I recognize the budgetary constraints. At the same time, the way it's done, which is improving, I will say, is demoralizing to the people who live in the communities along those roads. And so I'm asking you to find maybe a medium space where the trees are cared for more, so that you're not nicking them and not damaging them, and that the trimming, it is going to look like a tornado, but I think to Commissioner Yamas's point, if you didn't boom mow the upper branches of any of the trees, that could help. So obviously I have more ideas, but I'm not going to dominate the time. I appreciate the ability to talk. Thank you.
Just a few points I'd like to make. As a former park commissioner, I know that when the board and the border to border trail is not finished yet, but there were numerous trees removed to accomplish the border to border trail, as were trees removed for the Dexter Trail. I don't recall hearing objections to those projects and a demand for a policy that identified how those trees were going to be removed, how the trees were selected for removal, and then how those removals were paid for and who did them. So I just want to point out that the Road Commission is clearing its right-of-way, maintaining site distances, and keeping the traveled way safe. But there are other groups that are cutting down trees at a scale that far exceeds what we could say the Road Commission is doing. So I don't know whether the Board of Commissioners needs to adopt a policy that applies to all of its departments and practices outside the road right-of-way. But this is creating a great deal of time and energy and frankly, morale within the Road Commission over this issue. Commissioner Schenk, did you wish to speak again?
Thank you, Chair Fuller. Your point is well taken. I think you've called me the tree lady before. And
no, I have not called you the tree lady.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought
not.
You had it at a parks meeting when we were both on parks, which I'm no longer serving on. But I wouldn't have taken it as an insult at all if maybe it was somebody else. I have spoken out about those policies. It concerns me deeply about the border to border trail and the trees. And I have spoken with park staff about what can we do better and in planting trees in replacement. So I think the problem is that we each need to do our part. And yes, I would love to see a county policy regarding all of the departments and the tree policies for all of them. So it's not just picking on the Road Commission. And I understand that the Road Commission has to remove a fair number of trees. It's just that the Road Commission, whether or not tree care is its mission, the Road Commission is responsible for many, many trees. And those trees are important to our community members. And that's why I continue to speak out on it, even though at times like today, it's not very comfortable. Thank you.
I'd also like to point out that we do have a policy for sealing any scars or damage or open branches, limbs on oak trees. We do have a policy where those are sealed nearly immediately because we understand the concern about the spores, and there's a certain time of year that's more critical than others. In addition, with respect to certain species and wildlife, there again, there are restrictions that we abide by in terms of when we do certain practices. So just to be clear with some of the individuals who made comments suggesting that we either don't know or ignore those kinds of conditions, I want to reassure them that we are aware and we do comply.
And that is certainly something that staff can commit to. The ongoing, like I said, we spend a lot of time training and we can commit to ongoing training. We have a lot of newer staff. So certainly that is a worthwhile effort to continue that training, no matter how experienced they might be, so that to ensure the public that we are doing the best that we can with respect to that subject. It may not be what people want to see, and we understand that, but at least we're using best practices in being able to do that. And I think to Commissioner Schenk's point, our responsibility. Trees, they live in the right of way, and we understand that they exist, and we have a responsibility there. But our responsibility really is to maintain the rights of way and the road system within it. And so there's limited tools that we have available to us to do that. Unfortunately, and herbicide was one of them, and it's been prohibited by our board. We do not do that any longer. We understand the reasons for that, but that's a tool that's gone at this point. So now we're down to pretty much boom mowing and typical mowing practices, and it's becoming limited. And again, there's a resource issue there with respect to both staff and the financial ability to be able to manage our rights of way with the tools that we have available to us. So it's an ongoing balancing act.
There was also a concern raised about invasive species and suggesting that the road commission not cut them, and that we clean our equipment after we've, I guess, been in contact with some of them. I live in the country. I know all about invasive species, and I have no idea how road commission crews could be tasked with or expected to help with that, particularly with the herbicide prohibition that was adopted. If the Washtenaw Conservation District wants to take that on, that seems like their lane, so to speak, no pun intended. In a perfect world, we could control invasive species as the road commission, keep them out of the right of way, I guess. But I have no idea how we would do that within the constraints that we're under. And I also sincerely don't see that as the road commission's scope. So I don't know who the Washtenaw Conservation District is under the aegis of, where they get their money. I think they're proposing a millage be considered for their work, as I saw in their recent newsletter. But help us out here. We're doing the best we can with what we have. Are there other groups and organizations that can take some responsibility for this work so that we can attend to our priorities as well?
Well, and Barb, just so you know, Jim and his staff have been working with our local SISMA, and we have had some training with respect to invasive species. If there's a way for us to continue at least being aware, that's fine, and some of the educational opportunities that come along with that. Again, resource being a big issue here, but certainly continuing to have those relationships and working together where we can. Staff is open to that as well. And like I said, I know that Jim has a nice relationship with our local SISMA.
Thank you.
For the chair.
Commissioner Yamas.
So it was my hope that in speaking about this policy, that the policy would be written in a way that allows the public to know that we have a lot of these policies in place that they are asking us about, that they think that we don't do, but we do, such as having a tree trimming policy, such as abiding by, the environmentalist request, not cutting, when to cut the oak trees, and the patching of the trees, the bats, that we indeed do these things already, that people are thinking that we do not. But it was also my hope that, I don't know that this would be in the policy, and or it was my hope that we would be working in conjunction with other departments that hold that responsibility. The Parks Department that cut many trees. I'm thinking that people assume, I don't know, that since we're the face fronting of the public, that they see us out there much more often, that they think we're the only people that cut trees. That's a perception that I don't know what to do with. But about the maintenance practices. They were questions that were brought up in all of, because I read all the comments, and I indeed did send it to all of the commissioners in hopes that, you know, everyone would read it, as if I was hoping everybody had read the comments. Hence my questions came up about, I know that we cut dead trees, you know, a request from someone who requested that we come out and cut trees, and her making a comment that she was told we don't have time, and she was more than willing to come in and get a free permit to cut down the rotten tree. I mean, is that true? I mean, I don't know what those policies are, you know? So I posed those questions in that email purposely, because some of these things I'm gonna, you know, I am learning about just as the public is. Didn't really have, I don't know if it had something to do with the tree policy or didn't have something to do with the tree policy, or the policy that we already have in place about how we handle rotten trees. I know we handle them when we cut them down. I know, you know, the things that we do indeed do. If the property owner wants them, we give them the opportunity to take them. I've heard that previously, but in my email, I think it was from a comment of 5319 about a rotten tree, and asking that somebody come and take it down, that the rot in the tree was so big that her children could go through the hole at the bottom of the tree. So I guess the maintenance practice, I have questions myself that I'm asking about, you know, and asking if those things can be included in our policy, not the full policies on each one of those things, because this would just then be huge, right?
Cheryl, would you like to respond to the specific instance about the woman who asked for a tree to be removed and what our response was and why?
With respect to specific requests for dead tree removal, typically the response is that we will put it on a list and take the dead tree down as time permits. That is a true statement. It can take us quite a bit of time to get there. And unfortunately, if our time frame is not the same as what the property owner would like, we are more than happy to issue a permit, a free permit for them to do the work. And the permits, because they're working in the road rights of way. So anytime you're working in the public road right of way, you are supposed to have a permit. But basically offering them that free permit so that they can take the tree down themselves. Tree removal is expensive. And so a lot of times when it's a dead tree, understandably, they want us to take the tree down for them. Again, that's another as time permits type activity. And that list is very, very long. So yes, that would not surprise me if that person contacted us, that is the response that they received.
I'd also like to point out that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Cheryl, but our staff are not trained to take down trees. Where I live, there are huge dead trees, ash trees, that are dangerous.
They are trained. They do a very, very good job taking trees down and taking down safely. That is something that we train our staff on. There are trees that are beyond our capability of taking down. We've had instances where we've had to bring a tree contractor in because it is beyond our capability to do, either with the equipment and staff that we currently have or just from a timing perspective. But we do train and train safely for tree removal routinely.
Okay, we're at almost 10 o'clock. Are we ready to move on to public outreach? And just so everyone on this call or video meeting understand, this is a working session. There are no votes being taken in this working session, and the tree policy is not on the agenda for the regular meeting that convenes at 1 o'clock. This is a discussion that won't be finished today. We won't have a policy in front of us today. But we are working through a myriad number of concerns that are expressed to us with a variety of advocates speaking on their behalf. So we're going to take this at all deliberate speed as soon as we can. Public outreach, thoughts on public outreach?
So with respect to public outreach, I guess there's a couple things that are currently in the policy. One of them is that we will follow the community engagement policy and procedure with respect to significant tree removal. That's specifically listed as a track 1 activity, and all the things that are associated with that. I think perhaps similarly to what Commissioner Yamas was referencing earlier with respect to maintenance practices, there may be an opportunity to at least add pieces of what that policy may be other than simply a reference to that policy, so that at least there's a better understanding of what that all may entail. And then with the reference to the policy itself, if someone truly wants the details, those would be available in that individual policy. But that is at least referenced currently in that. And then just to also clarify, we do attempt to notify the property owners whenever possible. If nothing else, we have the wood disposal permit or wood disposal agreement that we ask the property owner to sign that indicates that whether or not they want the wood. And I think that was referenced earlier. It's typically cut in 8-foot lengths and set at a location where the property owner can access it if they want it in the future. So that is currently written within that. I do know that, again, if we're doing significant tree removal, that's typically associated with a project. There is normally a certain level of public engagement that's taking place with the community in that area, and the townships are usually notified at that point in time as well. But there may be an opportunity to sort of beef that up if that seems to be a concern that we're not doing that.
I'd like to ask our township partners as well, and we can talk about how we do that. But the townships have email lists and newsletters and outreach that go beyond what the road commission has at its disposal. It would be greatly appreciated and add significant value if our township partners would fan out the information that we share with them, because they reach people that, I mean, we just don't have them in our database.
Through the
I
chair.
think we're doing a great job on public outreach. We've made improvements and strides in recent years, particularly with the adding of the communications manager. That has not always been a dedicated staff person at the road commission, but it has been for what, 5 years, 3 years? So we've made great strides in that department. With respect to what we got in comments, again, there was the public engagement procedure that we have. Our policy is pretty clearly stated, 3 different tracks. And again, trying to consult or notify every tree 6 inches or greater, I don't believe is a realistic suggestion that we heard. Maybe desirable, but I don't think it's realistic. Other comments, Commissioner Yamas.
So I did see that some 6 inches and 12 inches was another reference. And to me, there was a bigger cry for legacy. They were called legacy trees, big trees, historical trees. There were more references to those champion trees. But the 6 to 12 inch trees is, I think, a feat that's difficult. But I wanted to speak mostly on the public outreach and the communication that you spoke about, Commissioner Fuller. And maybe Emily also, I know that in ways of mobilizing information, the fanning out that you speak to, I think is an excellent idea, because we cannot be responsible for every single citizen. It would absolutely be a great idea. Could indeed have a partnership with all the townships, the cities, that would be willing to take on that to inform their citizens of what is being done, how it's being done, if we provide them that information, if they would be willing to commit to indeed fan out that information. We could be the head of that, but to take it on for every citizen is way too much with the budget that we have. We don't, and or for Emily. But to me is when I had 1,200 members, had a mobilization tree, if you would, that I use to get information out. And I would think that, Emily, what I'm speaking about. This is an excellent idea and maybe one that we can take on if we don't already have something like that.
So Commissioner Yamas, on that point, right now, all township supervisors, township clerks, and trustees and treasurers are subscribed to receive alerts for road advisories, project updates of things going on in their townships. That's as far as we've gone with some type of like mobilization tree, but they all do subscribe to those. And then we hope that they open them and read them and pass them on. So they are included in getting that information when we do send a road advisory or a project update. But that's as far as it's gone right now.
Has there ever been, I'm sorry, through the chair again, has there ever been a request to those elected officials to take on a policy to do so? I mean, as they're asking us to take on a policy, that we ask them to take on a communication policy that would help distribute the information that we send to them. I know that it's might be a tough obligation, but it's a tough obligation that they're asking us to take on. And as we try to educate the public and let them know that we are responsive to them and want to be responsive to the townships, it does not seem like an impossible ask that we're asking of them. And Cheryl, I don't know if that would be an ask that you would put forward through our board, or but that seems like that would take it a step further, that we ask that they disseminate that information.
Yeah, and there may be an opportunity certainly as we're coming up to construction season, which will be right around the corner for us here, to talk about the weekly road work schedule and the project updates and all of that. And maybe as we sort of promote that that's going to be coming, maybe there's a way to work that in, Emily. We can think about that says specifically to township elected officials, that says, please encourage your residents to sign up for this and that type of thing. Again, trying to continue to push that information out.
Yeah, and we've provided that information the last 3 years, at least that I've been here, in our local road meetings, our annual meetings with townships. We provided a summary sheet of all the different ways that as an official or as a constituent that they could push their constituents towards, of ways that they can engage with the road commission. And those advisories, weekly roadwork schedule, have been on that list. So we can certainly do more of that, but we have been doing that at least for the last 3 years with our annual meetings.
Commissioner McCollum, you looked like you had a comment.
You read me very well, yes. For the public outreach, I believe that the Road Commission did an excellent job with the tree policy, looking at the amount of comments that we received back, which I thought was very good. I appreciate the public comments that we had. I think it's important that we know what the residents want, and we don't know if we don't ask them. So I appreciate the outreach. I thought it worked well. I thought it worked well with the leaderships in the townships, and the comments that they gave us seem more of a suggestive type, like, why not do this? Why not do that? And so I thought it went really well. And it also told us what a lot of people are wanting to know about, So it gets back to that public education. We could use their comments and to give out public education. We know where they're at. We know they want to know about tree legacy, arborists, if I pronounce that right, I'm not sure, maintenance and things like that. So we have a good idea of where to direct our education topics. So I appreciated that. Thank you.
You're welcome. I'd just like to point out that we received comments, 54 comments, and the population of Washtenaw County is about 368,000 people. So while we heard from 54 people, and I'm grateful to them for speaking to us, there are a whole lot of people out there who either have no questions or concerns or aren't responding to our overtures for their comments. Just, 54 people versus 368,000 residents in this county. Commissioner Doug Fuller, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I'd comment, not for the very first time, that Commissioner McCollum's comments about maintenance practices, specifically when we were talking about boom mowing, were thoughtful, and showed remarkable insight. When a boom mower goes down blank road and does some trimming back, because it's not always the surface mowing that is most important. It is the jungle that is trying to encroach on the road. Whether that happened because it was grass growing up from the surface or whether it was because a bush 5 feet back was following its natural inclination for sunlight. But when we boom mow down a particular road, and Commissioner McCollum correctly pointed out that, and I don't know what road she was referring to, it can look horrible. Absolutely no question. And along about May, it becomes impossible to tell where the boom mower actually was working. So and we live in a world of instant communication. So when somebody sees something and they're inclined to comment, they send a piece of information saying from walk to don't walk, running down the road looks horrible because your boom mower went through there and you were irresponsible and you were trimming things that didn't need to be trimmed. And that's, I'm not going to say never the case. I'm going to say that in well over 99.5% of what we do is necessary to accomplish our mission, which is to maintain, as Cheryl has correctly pointed out, maintain our right of way and whatever is within that right of way, which in our case is typically a road. In case of things looking horrible, right now, yesterday, which happened to be a holiday for some of us, a contractor working on behalf of one of our townships cleared a part of a pathway for a walkway that will be constructed later this year. And they did so with mechanical equipment. And it looks fairly alarming for about a half a mile down that roadway. And to our chair's comment, that's, and I'm sure most people, if you ask them, say, well, it's the goddamn road commission chopping things down again. And the road commission had absolutely nothing to do with it other than we did issue a permit to that township for working in our right of way. It looks like Sam Billy hell right now. Later on this season, it will have a walkway down through there or a non-motorized pathway. And it will look absolutely lovely. So again, I commend Commissioner McCollum for making thoughtful, reasonable, well thought out comments on the passing scene. Thank you.
Certainly. Let's move on since it is 12 minutes after 10. Protections for legacy, heritage, champion trees, however those are defined, and it varies. Would our managing director like to start us off on that theme? You're muted.
Sure. As far as protections for, and again, I too struggle. I saw Landmark, Legacy, Heritage, Champion all used, and at least from my uninformed opinion on this particular topic, I guess I don't even understand necessarily the differences between all of those. So that's something that we would need to be better educated on. But certainly there is no reference to any of those types of trees within the policy. Again, typically when we're taking trees down, we're not looking at the size of the tree or the age of the tree, because we're looking at the underlying problem. We're usually there to address an issue. If it's a project, whether it be an intersection type project, we're replacing a bridge in that area, maybe we're putting in additional drainage. So we are not looking at the size per se. We're looking at the conflict between where the tree is located and the type of work that is trying to take place. Certainly staff will try to design around things where we can. And so this, again, we would need to define what these things are, and certainly we could potentially make effort to design around certain things, but at the end of the day, at some level, it's the location more than the species or the size of the tree, at least from a staff's perspective in moving forward with this.
Additional comments on this particular topic? I mean, we've touched on it in all the others as well.
Chair?
Commissioner McCullum.
Yes, I saw this again as thankful that the comments from the public letting us know, some of the public letting us know what is important to them. Also seeing again the lack of education as far as what we do as the road commission with trees. And so one of the things that they were asking, someone was asking, a couple of people asked for someone who knows more about these trees, that we contact that person and before we cut trees down and things like that. So I understand how important this is to some people, the trees. However, I'm wondering if the public understands our place, like Cheryl explained what we're doing when we need to cut down a tree. I think to be able to express to the public that we're just not looking at it as something just to cut down and not care. I think that the Road Commission does care about the habitat of the county and wants to preserve as much as they can, but in certain instances, we just cannot do that. It's just safety reasons, not able to do that. I don't know if anyone saw the article on the, not an article, it could have been an article, a week ago, I think it was, where unfortunately a passenger passed away because this person lost control of their vehicle and drove into a tree. So the driver, I believe, lived and the passenger passed away, and that happened in Washtenaw County. And whether that's a road that happens a lot on or, needs to be looked at, I don't know. But it just brought to mind of what the Road Commission is doing and how important it is that even though people want these trees to remain in their habitat, that sometimes we have to make that hard choice of that tree has to be moved just to save, so that we can save lives. So that's the comment I had about that one. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner
Commissioner
Fuller.
Yamas?
In line with that, there was someone that was very thought-provoking in the comments. I appreciate the legacy, the heritage, the champion, because I too believe, probably the way a lot of Native Americans believe about the trees, because when I'm outside, I am in nature and meditate by trees and feel that spiritual connection. I do also want to recognize, though, as someone aptly put it, is we cannot plant another body when someone dies. And although we can't replace a 100-year-old tree, I can't imagine how we could replace or be negligent of knowing the impact of a large tree in the right of way when it causes the death of someone that can't be replaced. There were a couple of people talking about the injuries and how often that does happen. And I am really cognizant and appreciate that's why we have the right of way considerations. And in trying to balance that with what people want, hopefully people remember that. The danger, the great danger that it does produce. And I know that some people kind of like what's maybe even some people in my family might say about guns. You know, the gun doesn't kill people, it's the people, which is kind of an insane reasoning to me. But I want the greater good of people has to be cognizant and in the forefront. Thank you. That's all I wanted to say.
Certainly. I'd also like to point out one of the comments that was in our packet on page 19 of that packet talked about something called the Big Tree Registry. And again, it could be someone else's project to identify the champion and the heritage and the legacy trees. And I suspect that there are more outside the right of way than there are in. So we would really appreciate that another organization that's funded to deal with these kinds of trees, again, step up and help us with this. We don't have a legacy tree department within the road commission, and we can't afford one. So please, where there are resources and individuals who can be helpful, we welcome it. It's not always going to be a determinant in a decision about a tree, but we certainly welcome the information for consideration. We're not insensitive monsters, as we have been accused of in the past at public hearings on this issue. Commissioner Schenk.
Thank you, Chair Fuller. I contacted Megan DeLue of the Washtenaw County Conservation District just to see if they would be willing to work with the Road Commission, and she said yes, and they're bringing on some staff in the next few months who they think will be helpful if you are open to working with them. So I just wanted to let you know that, and I appreciate the conversation very much.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I'm going to leave those kinds of conversations under the aegis of our managing director, please. There are all kinds of implications for the suggestion of working with, right? And I want to be clear that working with does not mean deferring decisions to, but we certainly do appreciate any partnerships on this issue or others. Cheryl, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Not on the topic of the legacy or specific reference to the legacy or landmark heritage champion trees within the policy itself.
Okay. Commissioner Doug Fuller, any remarks before we move on to the next theme?
One comment, When this tree policy was first being put together, one of the suggestions that was made was that we could examine a policy that included planting new trees when it was found to be necessary to remove one. I was startled. We followed that pathway. I was startled because one of the first things we did was ask corporate counsel to have a look at that as where would the money come from? And it was pointed out that we are very specifically and emphatically forbidden for using state funds that come to the road commission to replace trees. There is unambiguous language in the acts that concern that. So, and that is not something that was brought up at any point today that I heard. So I just would like that to be pointed out, that we have taken a hard look at that. There does not appear, based on what we know today, to be a funding source to which, as Barb did point out earlier, we don't generate funds on our own. All the money that comes to us comes from somebody, and the somebody has restrictions. And some of the restrictions on state MTF funding is you may not use that for things like putting in trees. So, and I would welcome to find a funding source that would allow that. So, to Barb's point.
Thank you for that reminder, Commissioner Fuller. And I would welcome a funding source for that outside the jurisdiction of the Road Commission. I don't think we want to expand our scope to be in the tree business per se.
That's correct.
But that would be a conversation for another day. Commissioner Yamas.
So it would be my hopes, because I do remember that and appreciate that in our partnership with Parks and Recreation and some of the other departments that may want to partner with us, that they take on, one of the partnerships may be that we can give them information of where a tree was taken down so that they can plant a tree, because I believe they have income for that and we do not. We cannot take on unfunded mandates and put them on ourselves. But a partnership with Parks and Recreations, or just Parks, or the arborist, or some of the other people that have contacted us who do have funding, maybe our partnership would be, we took X amount of trees, had to take X amount of trees down. Can you plant them somewhere? Because I know we have not the manpower nor the money to do that, and legally we cannot do that. So the partnership that I see would look something like that, information sharing, in an effort to have someone else plant the tree.
Commissioner McCollum, closing remarks on this theme.
Yes, I want to thank Commissioner Schenk for contacting that person. We'll see where that would be helpful, and I think that would help to show the public that we are responding to their comments. Also, I appreciate what Commissioner Yamas said about partnering with other organizations that could possibly do that, to plant more trees. So I would be in agreement with that. And that's it. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Let's move on to the last item, if we may, please. Advisory Committee Outside Expertise. Cheryl, could you lead us off on that theme?
Sure thing. Another very common theme throughout the comments that we received was the lack of expertise with respect to trees on behalf of staff at the Road Commission. That certainly is a fair statement. Like I said earlier, we're not looking at the tree per se as far as size and type and all of those types of things. What we are primarily looking at is the location of the tree with respect to the work that we're trying to accomplish, and there's usually an underlying reason for that work, whether it be safety or drainage or whatever it may be. So certainly that is an area where staff doesn't have a ton of expertise, like I said, with respect to some of the species identification and the age and sometimes even the health of the tree. That certainly would be a fair statement.
Comments, commissioners?
I think that through the chair, the people that have requested such a thing, advisory committee, you stated it well, Barb, about, I can't remember your exact words, but a committee would not be somebody that could tell us what to do, and or I don't know, the experts that have offered their services. There's a forester, an arborist, somebody from the botanical. I believe I got 3 names. If people are willing to take on that work that we cannot do, but would be more advisory, I think is something that needs to be explored, and how it could be a help to the mission that we do have. And because we don't have the funds, like we can keep saying, to have a separate group, nor can we stretch our staff beyond that. That's not our purview. Thank you.
Sure. Commissioner McCollum, did you have a remark?
So similar to what I had said, the last remark I said, and that with Commissioner Schenck saying that to contact that person, that person's probably an expertise on things that we are not an expertise on, but for a good reason, we're expertise on road commission. And maybe that person can give us comments or suggestions or things like that. That would be helpful. And also with Commissioner Yamas saying that we, asking another organization or whatever to help us, to help with that. Because again, we do roads good, but that isn't our expertise. And so we would need outside help, and hopefully it would not be too laborious to connect with that outside help and work with a committee. But I just appreciate the comments that the public gave. Thank you.
Commissioner Doug Fuller, anything?
No, ma'am.
Thank you. Again, I would just like to emphasize that we need to be mindful that if there are outside partners, that they're not determining the decisions that we make with respect to a project. As Cheryl has stated very clearly, we're in the business of maintaining roads and protecting the safety of the traveling public on those roads. So if there are blind spots, suggestions, we're open to hearing them, as long as people understand we're not inviting them to help us make decisions on these projects by committee. That's not what this means or would mean at all. At least while I'm chair, that's not what it would mean. So I think out of respect for the professionalism of the staff, their mindfulness of the concerns of the public, and their desire to be good neighbors in all of this, we are doing the very best that we can to make sure we spend our money wisely with our primary charges of maintaining roadways and the public safety of the traveling public. Further comments? Cheryl, did you want any of your staff to remark, or shall we take a 5-minute break and come back?
Yes.
Doug needs a break.
All right, sure. Why don't we take our 5-minute break? I can see if staff has anything that they would like to add, and then we can certainly talk about the next steps from here.
Next item on our agenda is an update on the North Territorial Road Pontiac Trail project. Ms. Managing Director, you want to give us an intro, or how do you want to do this?
Actually, Barb, if I could ask for direction on the tree policy. I guess we heard a lot of comment. I think that staff's got a pretty good handle from the board on where we'd like to go with the policy. I just want to confirm that for the most part, we're looking at maybe perhaps some minor language tweaks to better reflect and maybe even incorporate a little bit of language from some of our existing policies, things like the community engagement, better expand on some of that and bring that back to the board. Is that what the direction that we're looking for?
That's what I'm looking for. May I have head nods from the rest of the commissioners in terms of? Great.
All right. And I know we're all
yes,
tree weary. Is there anything that Matt or Jim felt was not said previously that should be said at this point prior to that, or should we handle that on the staff side of things? I'm seeing heads. Okay, excellent. And we are happy to move on to the next subject.
Well, through the chair, really quickly, I had some questions that I put through the email. So the questions were, should like the response from 5395, how are those questions that have been posed through those be handled? Is it a click it problem where someone made mention of the corner of Oak Valley and Ellsworth and Waters and Wagner where they cannot see through the right of way without having to pull almost into the intersection? Is that something that we should tell them? How are we going to respond to those sort of things that weren't necessarily to the tree policy, but seems like that they need to be addressed? How are those going to be handled?
We can look at the individual comments. Staff was not intending to respond to all individual comments. That would be burdensome.
Right.
But if there's something that's specific that looks like it should be a WCRC fix it, we can put it into the system, assuming we have the information to be able to do that.
Yeah, well, I think that I did some of that, and I think I did ask, are those for the fix it or click it? And I think there were only a couple of those. So, thank you.
Well, your comments were posted at 2:15 a.m. today, Gloria. So
I know.
forgive us for not having dealt with them yet. But I trust that Cheryl and you can work through those specific concerns to make sure they're addressed.
Okay, great.
Yep, will do. All right, anything else on trees before we move on to Pontiac Trail and North Territorial?
Do you feel like you have a clear sense of direction from us, Cheryl, on next steps for the tree policy?
I think we do. Yes.
Okay.
As far as North Territorial and Pontiac Trail goes, this is a project that we've talked about a bit over the last, I don't know, year or so. But I'm going to very quickly turn it over to Matt, since I know, or I guess Emily and Matt, since I know that I believe that this project's a little bit new for Commissioner Yamas and Commissioner McCollum, who may not have seen the details of it in the past. So we'll go through that and answer any quick questions. And then what we're really looking for is sort of a thumbs up that we're moving into the next step and everybody understands where we're at and the timing and the next steps associated with this project. So with that, Matt, I'm happy to hand it over to you.
Thank you. So we've got a presentation here. Wanted to talk about the project. This project is included in the the budget this year and next. It is a intersection, currently is a four-way stop intersection in Salem Township. It is heavily congested during the peak periods. It's a skewed designed as it exists today that we have to deal with. And average daily traffic, all useful information on North Territorial is about 5,400 cars per day, and Pontiac Trail has 11,200 cars per day. Next slide, please. So you can kind of see, this is just a Google shot of the area. We have South Line to our north in Oakland County, and both Wayne County to the east as well. So our primary roads, Pontiac Trail and North Territorial, are important arterial primary roadways that carry a lot of volume, and are also, you can see by the map, Pontiac Trail is an important now north-south connector. That's an alternative to 23 and is a direct connect between South Line and Ann Arbor. The South Line community has grown tremendously over the course of the last 15 to 20 years and continues to grow. And Ann Arbor being an employment center, a desirable place to work and visit, certainly see a lot of volume go down Pontiac Trail. And also the case of North Territorial Road, a great east-west connector, alternative to our M14 and 94, and sees a tremendous amount of volume. So when you have two primary roads that are currently in a stop condition, it really becomes a constraint and is highly congested during the peak periods. Most recently on the Pontiac Trail corridor, we completed a single lane roundabout project last summer at Pontiac Trail and 7 Mile. And that was a successful project and was very well received. And ultimately the goal of addressing congestion along the corridor, we really have to take them one at a time. And it's going to be over the course of time that we are able to address congestion along the corridor. So the next priority that we've set is the Pontiac Trail North Territorial intersection. Next slide. So here's a aerial shot of the intersection a little closer. You can see there's two businesses located on the northwest corner and northeast corner. Edith's Market is the store on the west side, and east side is Flower Coffee Shop. Has been a couple different things, and I'm not sure what it currently is today, but certainly active businesses on the north side. And you can see the dramatic skew of the intersection, which complicates a solution to the intersection. By that, that skew is a difficulty for sight lines, for turning movements, but it's something that we have addressed in the proposed design solution. Just want to make note of that. Next slide. And here's a shot along the roadway as we're looking north. This is just south of Pontiac Trail, or I'm sorry, North Territorial on Pontiac Trail, looking north at the two businesses I just mentioned. So you have Edith's Market on the left, on the right is the Flower Coffee Shop. Next slide. So factors to consider. This intersection has been on our list for a long time. We call it the wish list. We monitor intersections, particularly our primary road intersections that are stop controlled, and we typically will evaluate them for what's called a signal warrant. So we have a signal warrant list, and when a signal is warranted due to congestion, delay, safety, we will look at either a traffic signal or a roundabout as a solution. And so in this instance, we have chosen the roundabout. We'll talk a little bit about that decision here shortly. Again, the surrounding area has and continues to grow. Congestion will only get worse as time goes on. It's been a need for a long time. And any improvement will be expensive due to the location and the skew. We are going to need to acquire right-of-way to build a solution. Next slide. So public perception so far, as I indicated, we constructed the Pontiac Trail and 7 Mile Road single lane roundabout last summer. We decided to do a public survey and see how things are going with that solution, and to get perspective for folks that have traveled it, either live in the community or travel it for their work purposes. We got a great result from our survey. We got 341 responses, of which 79% like the new roundabout, and almost that same number, 74% favored more roundabouts along the corridor, and many listed North Territorial Road as a priority. We've also reached out to the township supervisor, and certainly they are supportive of this project as well. Go ahead, next slide. So we have programmed this intersection with federal rural funds for 2022. Because of the intersection improvement is going to take a little time to design, and as I mentioned, it will require significant right-of-way acquisition. We needed to get started on it this past year. We did that. We talked with the board at the May 5th working session last year, and we got started in comparing the single lane roundabout and the traffic signal. And through that discussion, and for many reasons, the recommendation was to move forward with a single lane roundabout, which we got concurrence for. Next slide. Some of the benefits of the preferred roundabout was it certainly solves the congestion issue, promotes safety, and keeps the speeds low. As I stated, the stop controlled intersection functions very safely, but it doesn't move traffic. The speeds are low because people have to come to a stop at the intersection, and the roundabout will keep the speeds low as compared to the signal. When you have a green phase, that those speeds will be rolling through that intersection at 45, 50, 55 miles an hour. And when you have a skew like this intersection has, that speed and the skew, if there were to be an accident, you'd have a high probability of injury or fatality. So that's why the roundabout was really the preferred alternative. The roundabout does have a smaller footprint. It is a significant footprint, but it's a smaller footprint compared to the signal, because when you're doing a signal design, you need to bring that skew closer to a 90 degree. It doesn't have to be 90 degree, but you need it to be closer. So what that meant was we had to put in curves that expanded the footprint. So expanded the footprint, expanded the right-of-way, and cost more. So there'd be more right-of-way impact, more environmental impact, and it would cost more. So that's why we ended up choosing the roundabout alternative. Next slide. Since that decision, we went ahead and moved forward with really developing the design to further detail, refined it, to determine our right-of-way acquisition needs, and to refine the project cost estimate. And that's where we're at this milestone and want to bring back to the board and give you an update. So next slide. With that, I'll go ahead and start sharing my screen because it's a little easier to see we go. Can you see that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. So you can see a single lane roundabout at the intersection. Ultimately, we're dealing with the skew by bringing the roadway, particularly south of North Territorial. We've got to offset the intersection. And really, a couple things are going on here. We are trying to avoid significant impact to the existing businesses. The business on the west side of the road is on a small parcel, what we've labeled it parcel 3. And we really can't afford to have much of an impact there. It's an older building. Previously, at one time, has tanks in the ground for selling gas. So we don't want to impact that parcel, because it will have environmental and fiscal impacts if we look to buy that parcel. There's not much. It's a rather small parcel, so that was one of our design constraints. Also, the existing business on the east side of the road, the Flower Coffee Shop, has a little more space. We actually have a little more right of way to deal with, and so there was an opportunity to move the circulating roundabout intersection to the east of the existing intersection, and that helps with dealing with the skew. So this is an optimal design. We looked at multiple iterations of the roundabout and landed with what you see here. Really addresses all the issues of the turning movements and visibility, sight lines. But again, it is impactful in the way it does affect the parcels on the southeast corner of the intersection. It would require significant right-of-way acquisition, and wanted to just kind of show you visually what that would look like. We're doing much more work on Pontiac Trail to deal with the intersection skew. And then you can see on North Territorial, the work is more aligned to the existing roadway configuration. And then we have labels here kind of showing the various amounts of right-of-way acquisition that we anticipate. And then on top of the right-of-way acquisition, we'll have various temporary grading easements we would need to acquire as well. So that kind of shows that. With that, I'd be happy to answer any particular questions regarding the layout. Otherwise, I can go back to the PowerPoint presentation.
Matt? Oh, Matt?
Go ahead.
I was just, thank you, Doug. I was just going to say that looking at the present road, it looks like a very nice, quiet country road, but not with this amount of traffic going down. That's not, it deceives you. And to country roads, I think people have a tendency to go a little bit faster down country roads than they do other roads. So that is also, this is also a good reason to put a roundabout in. But I think also that one of the preferred reasons is that these roundabouts look so good when you put them in. That it looks good now. It's a nice country road, but that's not what it is anymore. It's a lot of traffic, it's congestion, it's probably very frustrating for people. But when that roundabout goes in, that's going to look really nice. And just the aesthetics of it, just the look of it is going to slow people down before they even get to the roundabout, just how it looks. So I think this is a great idea.
Well, thank you for the compliments.
Commissioner Yamas.
Yep.
So Matt, you answered the question right away, which came up for me was with parcel 3. What a great decision, because that would be so costly with the tanks, and I'm familiar with it. I have a question. You have row. So what is the red demarcation main and what is the blue? Is the red the number of acreage or that has to be purchased to make this happen? Or,
Yeah, that's correct. So we have the parcel labeled, parcel 11, for instance. You've got multiple parcels with one owner. And in those parcels, the red right away, for where my cursor is here, you're looking at roughly about an acre of acquisition required.
right,
And then in other areas, you'll see this blue, and that's that temporary grading permit that we would need to secure in addition to the acquisition for the right of way. And that's usually just grading to tie back into the existing ground.
okay. Okay, and so how would this impact parcel 2? Would they gain acreage or,
Actually, the existing right of way would remain
okay,
because we've got a lot of existing utilities that are there.
okay,
So they would still have access to the road if they needed a permit to get access to it. And we would just purchase basically the difference between the existing right-of-way line and the new right-of-way line. This would all become public right-of-way.
okay. Okay, great. Thank you.
No problem.
Matt, do we then take out the pavement?
Yes,
Okay,
the old road would be obliterated and restored as green space.
great.
Matt,
Yes.
you gave us the existing traffic counts, and I wasn't quickly enough in grabbing a pencil. North Territorial, I think you told me is roughly, or you indicated was roughly 5,000 vehicles a day,
Yes, just over 5,000.
and Pontiac Trail is 12.
Yeah, it was just under, it was like 11,200 or something.
Couple of things about that. One is, and you did address the point that South Lyon is growing, but for everybody's edification, a year ago, I know that I read in a publication from the Salem Township Planning Commission that they had approved over 1,000 new houses, or projects included over 1,000 new houses to the east of South Lyon City. Rule of thumb is 10 to 1, so that's 10,000 more vehicles in Lyon Township that are going to go somewhere. As you pointed out, City of Ann Arbor is a big time employer. It's a sponge for all of southeastern Michigan. The traffic impacts for Pontiac Trail are immense, which leads me to my other question is immediately south of this intersection, conversationally a half a mile, is the intersection of Pontiac Trail and Dixboro, which is another skewed intersection. Is there any consideration so far been given to making this into a tandem project with a roundabout at Dixboro and Pontiac Trail, so that we're only blocking that mile of road once rather than twice? That's a question.
Yeah, I'd certainly, if I had my druthers, I'd love to address all the needs on the corridor.
Right.
Much like our discussion this morning, we are so fiscally constrained. In fact, we're taking all the rural funds that the county receives for that given year and apply them to a single point in the county. And that's all the rural funds we have. And ultimately, we've got a lot of competing needs. We can look at that for programming it for future years. But at this time, this is all we've got to offer to solve this particular intersection.
And Matt, I think if you could also talk about, we do have other locations where we have done this sort of on a, piece by piece approach as needed. And the intersections will function. They're not so close together that having one remain as a stop sign and the other one as a roundabout, that we don't envision that there'll be a problem operationally.
Yeah, there's, actually, I'll stop sharing and then show an aerial image just so that we're all working from the same mindset. Yes. Okay, so now I should my sharing.
Yes, you are.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so this is the triangle that we were referring to. And as Cheryl mentioned, we've got enough distance between the two intersections of Dixboro Road and North Territorial on Pontiac Trail that I feel like it's going to be adequate, and really this will free up the volume to get through the intersection of North Territorial. Particularly the volume on Dixboro Road is going to be much lower than North Territorial Road. So that's why, one of the reasons why this intersection is probably higher in the pecking order when we're looking at priorities. And so certainly a future project could be considered for Dixboro and Pontiac Trail, but that you've got so many other competing projects as well throughout the county.
So Matt, what's the detour going to be during construction?
That's a great question.
Oh, I shouldn't have asked.
No, and that's another reason. Sometimes it sounds great to be able to work on projects at the same time and get it all squared away, but then that also presents a problem for being able to get around. So Dixboro certainly is one of those options, but I'd have to look at the detour. I'll get back to you on that.
Okay.
We're still working through the maintenance of traffic plan. It will be a closure. We will provide access to our existing businesses, much like we did for Pontiac Trail and 7. And we got that intersection job done in fairly short order for when, as compared to major infrastructure projects go. I think it was in the order of 6 to 8 weeks. We were out of there with a full new intersection reconstruct. So I think this one would be very similar to that. So
because we're limited on hard surface roads are fairly limited there, right, as alternatives?
yeah, in fact, on Pontiac Trail and 7, we had to detour on one of the legs on a soft surface road, and we worked with our district foreman and
Okay.
look at additional dust control measures and grading, and we charge that project and certainly work with the community to let them know that that's going to be the case, because we are limited. And even when we do post our detours on paved roads, we recognize that the local roads are going to see more use for the folks that live in that community, because it's maybe a faster route for them.
Right, just appreciating the volume of traffic that travels through there north-south-ish. It'll present challenges in terms of getting the public ready for that closure. And I know you've done a great job with the message boards and such, and Commissioner Schenk, that's right in the heart of your district. So that's, something that I'm glad you're on the call today to be aware of and have a heads up on this coming. So any suggestions you have for us in terms of how to reach the residents and prep them for this disruption, because it's going to be great when it's done, would be welcomed and appreciated.
And I will point out, this is programmed for 2022. So not this season, but next, and could potentially be obligated and then be constructed in 23. So that we are a little ways out, and we've got a lot of ground to cover in the way of right-of-way acquisition. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing and go back to the presentation. Emily, if you wouldn't mind. So on this particular slide, this is the layout. The southeast corner is certainly the most impacted from a right-of-way perspective. So we'll be dealing with that property owner quite a bit. And we've already heard and had initial conversations with a lot of the existing property owners out there, because we've done some survey work. They recognize something's going in the planning stage, and we certainly are going to be discussing it further after this check-in with the board. From a budgetary standpoint, go ahead, next slide. There we are. The construction budget cost estimate didn't change much. We're at 1.4 million, 1,425,000, and then right-of-way acquisition with that previous slide where we had the acquisition acreages and square footage for grading permit. What we did in order to better estimate that, we worked with one of our appraisers to develop an estimate of what it would cost. We haven't quite gotten to the step of getting an appraisal yet. That would be what we do as far as the next step. But that estimated cost was at approximately 200,000. So that is a significant number, but I'd like to point out, certainly with the continued growth along the corridor, I think this is a high enough priority project. It certainly is a significant investment, and it's not going to get any cheaper, the cost of right-of-way, as if we were to delay an improvement like this. So total estimated cost for construction right-of-way is sitting at $1,625,000. So it is a big cost for an intersection improvement, but given all the attributes of this one, where we're dealing with a skew, it does require quite a bit of right-of-way acquisition, and this is a reasonable cost for the project. But again, we have a lot of competing needs at the road commission as far as where our dollars and cents go. So next slide.
Hang on, Commissioner McCullum.
Yeah,
Thank
sorry.
you, Chair.
I lost my,
you said this is going to be 2022 when the project is going to start?
Yeah, the funds are 2022. We could start construction in 2022, or we could obligate in 22 and build in 23. It really is going to be a function of how fast we can get the right-of-way acquisition, get all our permits, how all that goes.
I was just wondering, because I know construction materials and cost and labor and that are going up high, quickly, who knows why, the pandemic or whatever. So I'm wondering, would that number change significantly or just stay around that?
Well, that's a great point. Certainly we keep tracks and tabs on all the various bid tabulations that we do and the state of Michigan does in our area. So we have a good idea of what estimated costs are, but that's based on past projects. These are most recently past projects, but there's always the potential for those cost increases. And I would, to your point, the sooner we can construct this, the better chance we have at fighting those inflationary costs.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Commissioner, go ahead, Cheryl, and then
Okay.
Commissioner Yamas.
sorry, if I could just add to what Matt was just saying, these days it's taking longer and longer to get a project out to bid. Despite all of staff's best efforts, like Matt said, the right-of-way acquisition on this is going to be extensive. That is a very timely process, and we cannot bid a project without having that right of way in hand. So certainly that's a big hurdle. In addition, there is quite a bit of environmental clearance that's required on any project these days, and we will certainly make sure that all of that is done appropriately. But again, we cannot bid a project without having all of that in place. So yes, we believe it is in our best interest to advertise this just as soon as we possibly can, but there is a lot of work to be accomplished before we get to that point. There's also sometimes strategy in how you bid a project. So you reach a point usually each year where you ask yourself, is it cheaper to still try to do it this year for the reasons you just said? It's not going to typically get cheaper with respect to labor and material. But if contractors are starting to book up and they can start to charge a premium, they're going to potentially do that. And then sometimes it is actually cheaper to bid for the following year when contractors might not have started to fill their books yet. So there is a little bit of strategy involved in that. And it sort of becomes the time of year when we finally have all the environmental clearance and right of way in hand. But we'll certainly keep the board posted as we're continuing to move forward with that.
Thanks, Cheryl.
Good point. Commissioner Yamas.
Thank you, Cheryl. So I believe you answered some of my question. My question was my unexperienced opinion is that we do the acquisition first, but it sounds like that's what happens, correct? Would we be moving to start the acquisition process as quickly as we can? And for the funding, although the funding is for 2022, do we just move forward and reimburse ourselves, or how does that work? Because it seems, since Doug's announcement of what Lyon Township has approved, that sounds like the area that we're working in. That's east of that area. So I guess my question was, when would that acquisition process begin?
We can certainly, based on the design, start that appraisal process and getting those appraisals. And then at the same time, we're going to be doing our public outreach. Obviously, this is a significant project. We will have a public meeting virtually that we would do in the design phase. But first, we want to make sure our right-of-way specialist, Kurt Brochet, has an opportunity to discuss with the impacted property owners. And he has had initial conversations, but wants to certainly have further conversations with them prior to a public information meeting. So all those things can start moving ahead after this milestone. Check in with the board.
And then also just to clarify, when we're talking about these being 2022 dollars, those are the federal dollars associated with construction. So everything else is coming out of our budget. So we do have money budgeted for this year for the design and to start the right-of-way acquisition portion of the project. So those costs we would bear regardless. And then next year, or in 2023, depending on when we actually construct the project, that's when we would essentially be reimbursed with those federal construction dollars, which staff keeps calling 2022 dollars.
Thank you.
Additional questions before Matt moves on? Commissioner Schenk, you with us? Okay. Yeah, okay.
All right, I think the next slide was the next steps. Yes, all right, well rehearsed. So with that, I just wanted to get certainly feedback from the board, wanting to make sure that this is still a priority that we move forward with. Ultimately, if we had any reservations, we'd have to act fairly quickly to reallocate those federal funds. But certainly my recommendation is to move forward with the project, recognizing that the right-of-way acquisition is significant. It is a fairly large number, and as the board knows, with our current dealings, it is a bit of a wild card at times. and can go, certainly that is the floor number, and can get more expensive with legal and property owners that may think things are worth more than our appraisals. So just want to go into this project with all our eyes wide open, as Cheryl has advised me.
Chair?
Yes,
Um,
ma'am.
I think this is a great project, and I think most of us who've lived here in the county long enough know how fast South Lyon has been growing for quite some time. So it's no surprise. And I think too that this is a project that when it's done, it's going to be good for a long time. So I think this is a good investment, and it's much needed.
Thank you, Commissioner. Do I sense a consensus that we'd like staff to proceed on the pathway to preparing for this project?
Yes.
Great,
Yes.
okay. Is that adequate, Cheryl, Matt? Okay.
Yep.
Commissioner, oh,
Any big hurdles? That's what we wanted to hear. Otherwise, staff's prepared to move forward as they usually do, bringing all their expertise to bring this project forward.
great. Commissioner Schenk,
Well, thank you. I just want to commit to being as helpful as possible in trying to reach out to the people who live in the area or just who might drive through that area, because for some, even though this will have been going on for several years before construction starts, it'll probably still be a shock. But I think, you know, whatever I can do to help, I'm happy to do to get the word out.
thank you. And certainly, as you may hear complaints about congestion, I'm hoping this provides you with an arrow in your quiver to say help's on the way. We're working on it. And if you feel the need at any time for us to do more than that in advance of what our typically scheduled public information sessions would be, let us know. I mean, Cheryl is always willing to work to make those things happen so that people they don't feel bushwhacked, blindsided, ambushed, whatever words you want to use. Help's on the way. We're doing the best we can as fast as we can to get this congestion mitigated.
Well, thank you. I think my first step will be to go to the township meetings and talk about it there a little bit, and then refer questions back to you, just so people know that it's on the agenda. On your
That's
agenda.
great. Sure. I would ask that you keep Cheryl informed of,
I will.
you know, if you go to township meetings and you hear X, Y, or Z, if we can stay in partnership on this information loop, I think it might be in our best interest going forward.
I
That'd
agree.
be
Thank
great.
you.
Yeah, no, the more we're hearing about the project and we're pushing out the information, that would be great. We have a very good working relationship with Salem Township, but certainly all efforts are much appreciated. So happy to hear anything that comes up.
And I just will add that we certainly recognize that Northfield Township and Ann Arbor Township residents will certainly be impacted as they're getting around the community. We'll cast that net a little further just to make sure that we get good public engagement.
Any further questions for Matt or Cheryl on this project? Seeing none, is there anything else that commissioners want to raise at this point before we consider adjournment?
Not I.
All right, hearing none, I would entertain a motion to adjourn this working session.
I motion that we adjourn the working session.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing none, I will call the roll. Gloria,
Yes.
Doug Fuller,
Yes.
Joanne,
Yes.
and Barb Fuller votes yes. Roderick Green, as we noted in the previously, is absent today from the working session. We are adjourned. See everybody at 1 o'clock.